Welcome back to another Reddit readings video. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these creepy glitches in the Matrix. I miss her more now. Okay, after much contemplation I decided to post this. I've been a huge fan of Glitch in the Matrix stories for years, and it has honestly made me a bit more in tune with my surroundings as I've wanted to catch a glitch for myself. However, I would have never imagined what the universe had in store for me. I'm also going to say I completely understand if no one believes me. I honestly don't believe it, and it happened to me. However, I can't tell my husband, and everything else will just think I'm crazy, so I'm gonna post it here where there seems to be open-minded people while I sort through things. In early 2020, my sister-in-law lost her battle with addiction. After years of our family fighting for her to get clean and a good stretch where she seemed to be getting better, a friend erased months of progress, which inevitably led to her overdosing. The past 2 years has been hard, and my husband has been trying to hold himself together, but it hit him hard with the loss of his sister. He tries for me and his daughter, but I can tell he's never going to be quite the same. A couple weeks ago, our local county fair came to town. It was a poor excuse for a fair with 5 shady kids' rides, 2 food vendors, and in general not much to do. We were inside a large event building where they had various local art, quilts, and a car show going on. The city tried to revamp this fair this year with a new location and in general a different company, which just didn't work as they planned. After browsing for a while and seeing almost everything, we decide to head out, but I decide to take a potty break first. I left my husband, mother-in-law, and daughter by the handful of vintage cars and went to the bathroom. The bathroom wasn't in the same building, but behind it in a smaller standalone building. As soon as I walked in, something really just seemed off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt uneasy in a way I have never felt before. It felt as if I wasn't supposed to be there, like something was wrong. I quickly used the bathroom, freshened up a little, and headed back out to only find what was just a beautiful blue sky was now full of dark clouds and looked like rain. I go back between buildings but stop dead in my tracks as my niece runs up to me grabbing my hand. "It's going to rain. We need to go now." She's 7 and had been living in a neighboring state with her dad after her mom passed away. She was set to start school in a couple days, and I knew she was hours away. I am genuinely confused, but my husband's birthday was just a few days prior, so I think maybe they surprised him with a quick visit. I am, however, floored when I see my sister-in-law walking towards me, my mother-in-law and husband trailing behind, talking casually with the stroller. "We're going to head outside before the rain starts," she says, and I can feel my lip tremble as I just look at her. She looked like she did when she was clean, her face clear and at a healthy weight. Her hair was a bit lighter, which was no surprise as she was always experimenting with her hair. I wanted to run up and hug her, but I didn't. My husband looked happy and a bit more put together than I had seen him in over a year. I mindlessly followed them outside, feeling happy and glad to be here at this moment. Something told me not to question it, but thoughts of us sitting in the funeral home picking out her urn and her mom writing her obituary swirled in my mind as I watched my sister-in-law and niece buy their tickets and then head to the Ferris wheel. "Hold these for us," my sister-in-law asked me as she handed me a strand of 4 tickets that were folded up. I agreed and gripped the tickets in my hand as I watched them climb onto the ride, and as I watched it spin, my head also began to spin. I felt dizzy and felt the blood leaving my face as I passed out. I woke up on the floor of the dirty bathroom, slumped over right in front of the toilet as if I had passed out, and slipped off the seat even though I was fully clothed. It took me a minute to stand up and figure out what had happened exactly. I just replayed the about 15 minutes worth of events that had happened. I was beyond confused, but after a while I made my way out of the bathroom right as my mother-in-law was coming in. "There you are." We were getting worried. The sun was now shining bright again, and my scruffy-faced husband was standing there looking at his phone as our daughter slept in the stroller. I glanced around wondering where my sister-in-law was. I almost asked them but stopped myself and decided to let this play out, hoping they were finishing up the rides, but we left shortly after with no mention of my sister-in-law or my niece. I checked Facebook on the ride home and cried quietly in the back as her memorial page was still up. I felt off since and choked it up to me passing out, and even decided to make a doctor's appointment. However, last weekend when I was washing the shorts that I had worn that day, I found 4 red tickets folded up in my pocket. I still have no explanation, as these are the exact tickets my sister-in-law had handed me in what I thought was some sort of dream or hallucination. I had pulled the shorts out of the dryer right before leaving for the fair that day. I hadn't worn them since, and we went straight home after the fair. We got an armband when we paid to get in but never received any tickets. We didn't ride any rides, enter any raffles. I even checked with my husband, making sure he didn't enter a raffle or something and sneak the tickets into my pocket. He denied it, also agreeing we didn't receive any tickets that day. I still have them and could post a picture, but they are literally tickets, so I don't feel like the string for 4 red tickets would prove anything. I don't know what to make of this. I distinctly remember my sister-in-law buying 8 tickets. The Ferris wheel took 2 each, and that left my niece with 4 tickets to ride the other 2 rides. She wasn't too big to ride. This was an actual conversation that took a good 5 minutes as we circled the rides, testing to see which one she was too tall to ride, as most were aimed for really small kids and the tickets were overpriced. Plus, with the approaching storm, there wasn't much time to ride them more than once. I remember this all very distinctly. My sister-in-law always wore leggings and didn't have pockets, which is why she handed me the tickets to begin with. I keep replaying the short time in my head as everything fit together so weirdly. I estimated it all happened in a span of 15 minutes, which is approximately the amount of time they said I was in the bathroom. I don't have any explanation. I feel as if I shifted into another universe where my sister-in-law never died. I almost feel like she was pregnant as her belly was a bit round. Did I manage to jump into a timeline where she never died? Where she stayed clean and got her life together? She was so vibrant and happy. My husband and mother-in-law was happier than I have seen them in years. My daughter was the same. I honestly don't know. What I do know is I will never tell my husband. He has begged for 5 more minutes with his sister, and it's unfair that I apparently got 15. 2 of us teleported and now things are off. I apologize if this doesn't make sense, but I'm freaked out and have no idea how to explain this. My coworker and I were driving back from dinner to the place we were staying at. We had driven this route a handful of times and were very familiar with the surrounding area. It was a 7-minute drive from the restaurant to where we were staying. Okay, so we left the restaurant and had a straight drive for about 2 miles. No turns until we had to take a right turn into the parking area of the property we were staying at. As we approached the hotel, the tall Courtyard by Marriott sign was visible, as was the building. We were a block away from the turn, and then we just suddenly weren't. We were all of a sudden driving on a highway, about to take the exit on the right. It was immediately apparent, and I said to my coworker, "Wait, something is wrong here." And he replied, "Yeah, what the hell just happened?" We were just about to turn into the parking area. I told him to pull over, and I looked up on maps where we were. The map showed we were 20 minutes away, in the opposite way we had come from. It was physically impossible, and the time on the clock was still the same as it was when we were next to the hotel. I don't understand, and neither does he. And he doesn't want to tell anyone because it sounds so crazy. We teleported 20 minutes away. It was the single most disorienting feeling I have ever experienced. But now after that, I feel like everyone in my life has just changed. Everyone feels so distant. I can't shake the feeling that something is still really very off. Please help. TLDR. Drove with coworker and teleported 20 minutes away and was so disoriented, and now things still feel off. Glitch, or did I die in the previous universe? NSFW. It's been about a week and I am still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I might have died in another timeline and just jumped to this one. Background: I was driving down PCH, a very long highway up the coast of California, at 8:15 p.m. exactly. And I know this because I called my mom to let her know I was stopping to watch the sun as it was setting, because it was breathtaking. As I'm watching the sunset, I hear a car's horn blazing, and I mean it was loud and sounded like it was coming right at me. I turn around and see a car coming straight towards my car and myself, and then suddenly, I'm sitting on the ground, very confused. A headache is starting to come on, but I wasn't hit. My car wasn't hit, and I'm still breathing, obviously freaked out. I get back up and check my phone to call my mom because this is just crazy. And then I noticed it's 8:13 p.m. I checked my phone to see if I actually did call her, but there's no history of it. I shake the nerves off and decide to just get home quickly, thinking maybe that was foreshadowing an event I did not want to relive. Once I'm home, my mom asked me why I called her and just hung up. I asked what time I called. She said 8:15 p.m. There is still no history of me calling her on my phone. Am I crazy, or did I just timelines? Everything here seems more vibrant and colorful. I can feel more energy here as well. I'm not sure. Any guesses? That's not my neighbor. I have thought for the last 2 years that this event was a Mandela effect, but after finding this sub, I am starting to think maybe it was a glitch. Anyone else have something so blatant happen? I'm hesitant to tell this story. No one believes it, even my husband who saw the whole thing. But here we go. My neighbor's directly across the street from me. They're married and expecting a baby. The wife is a tiny blonde woman, very Caucasian, very tiny build. We wave to each other daily and yell salutations across the street. She goes into labor and they leave for the hospital. A week later, I see the car has returned, so I bake some cookies to take over and congratulate them. Another day or two goes by and I see a thick, brunette lady outside with a baby and I wave, assuming it's a relative that's come to help with the newborn. A few more days pass and I see the husband outside with the brunette and the baby, so I take the cookies over. It's her. It's the wife. Same name, same personality, and same demeanor, except she's now a thick, kinda tall, brunette, Pacific Islander. The husband doesn't acknowledge any difference. She talks to me and treats me the way she always has, but it's a totally different person. My husband noticed as well. We made some jokes about him wife swapping at the hospital, but since he can't wrap his brain around it, he starts to believe that she's always been this person, even though he clearly remembers her teeny and blonde. I feel like everyone has lost their minds. It's been almost 2 years since that shift and she's still a thick, tall, brunette, and then I feel like maybe I've lost my mind. My only consolation is that my husband remembers it too, if only vaguely. Update 1. So I showed the picture I found of her to my husband last night. He's a little bit of a mess about it. The man is not a conspiracy guy at all, but he remembered her. He started asking some questions and tossing around ideas about what could have happened. I convinced him to go to the church this morning and attend their service. I spoke briefly with the pastor and said my neighbor had recommended that I attend. He was grateful she was sending people his way, even though, get this, she hadn't attended since she had the baby. She apparently changed churches to one a little closer when she gave birth. So, I don't know where to go next except for putting some feelers out in the neighborhood and finding an excuse to hang out with her. Update 2. I'm so sorry that took so long. I didn't want to update until I had spoken directly to my neighbor. So, I endured the heat all week and spent way too much on flowers to plant in an attempt to run into my neighbors. The old lady next door doesn't remember the neighbor's wife having blonde hair, but her middle-aged daughter does. She said, yeah, that was a couple years ago. I don't know why she went so dark. I thought it would wash her out. When I pointed out that it wouldn't wash her out because her complexion is tan now, she looked confused and said that maybe she had been tanning because she did look darker. I pushed it a little further and asked if she also seemed taller, but she seemed stuck on the fact that the very Caucasian blonde woman had gotten tan enough for such dark hair to look natural. She gave me several reasons but didn't seem convinced either. I also spoke to the changed lady's next door neighbor and mentioned her having blonde hair. Neither he nor his wife remember her ever being blonde. They both agreed she had dark hair on move-in day. Yesterday I finally cornered a changed neighbor lady outside. She pulled up with groceries and I offered to help carry them with her. I started talking about the church and how I had spoken with the pastor. She said some really nice stuff about the church, but also that she needed a church closer. That's why she had switched. When I pointed out that her new church was actually further away, she said she had never actually measured it, but it seemed closer. I pointed out that her old church was in our town and her new church is in the next town over, and she said the back roads must just make it seem shorter. Some red flags popped up here because the back roads around here are long, windy roads that circle around our town and pass by all the farmland. It doesn't ever make things quicker. It's a nicer drive, sure, but it always adds a good chunk to drive time. Also, the new church is in the middle of the town, 2 streets over from Main Street, so if you take the back roads, you actually have to circle back to get on the main roads to get to it anyway. It would be much more convenient to take a direct route using the town roads that connect the 2 towns. It's almost a straight shot from the middle of our town to the next town over. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. After a little while of small talk, I brought up the hair. I said that I was trying to go blonde to hide some gray that I have coming in, and did she have any tips? She laughed and said the last time she was blonde, she was in high school, and it was a mess, so she didn't recommend it. I pointed out that she was blonde right before having her baby and she got really weird, almost defensive, and said she hadn't. She had only tried to go blonde that one time in high school, and it turned orange, so she dyed it back immediately. I told her I chalked it up to pregnancy brain because she was definitely blonde while she was pregnant. She ended the conversation shortly after and thanked me for my help, but you could tell she was annoyed with me. So guys, not super sure what I've learned other than the girl next door to me, old lady's daughter, and I are going to have another chat. She made me feel like she remembered, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. I'm going back to the church on Sunday to poke around and talk to some more people. Any more ideas? Cat falls 22 stories to its death. Soon afterwards, it saunters out of the bedroom like nothing happened. So this happened yesterday, and I'm still having a hard time processing it. But man, am I ever thankful. So I, 36 meters, live in an apartment on the 22nd floor with my mom, And my brother, let's call him Gary, 26 meters. My other brother, let's call him Glenn, 34 meters. And his wife left for a weekend trip out of town. So they asked us to watch their dog, Hector. A small dog, not sure the breed, but doesn't matter here. And their cat, a Sphinx named Mort. They dropped them off at our place on Thursday night. We obviously have a discussion afterwards, between us living here, that we need to have all the windows closed, mainly because of the cat being able to jump anywhere. So the next day, Friday, I get off from work early, and so does Gary. I'm doing some long overdue cleanup around the place while Gary has a nap. So Mort is hanging out with me as I'm cleaning, sniffing things, climbing stuff he shouldn't be climbing. Standard cat fare. I go into my bedroom to put something away. Mort follows me there, so I close my sliding glass door. When I pet him, he felt really warm, so I figured he just wanted to cool off in my room for a bit. I exited the room to grab a glass of water. While drinking the water at the sink, I hear a small thud, as if the cat had just leaped from my dresser to the floor or something. I go back into my room, and I don't see Mort anywhere. I notice that my one window is open though. It only opens up slightly, I presume to prevent kids from falling out. So I close it. I search the apartment, but I can't find the cat anywhere. I'm starting to get worried, so I wake up Gary, tell him the sitch. He joins the search. He looks over the balcony edge towards the ground. I was honestly afraid of doing that myself. He sees nothing, so some hope has been replenished and we continue looking. He asked again what the series of events was. I get to the part where my one window was open, and I closed it. He gets a feeling and looks over the edge again, towards a slightly different area. Oh shit, bro. There is something down there. Oh fuck. Is that him? I look over the edge, and I fucking saw it. A mass of flesh, blood and bone, splattered all over the sidewalk below. I jump back in shock. Oh no. No fucking way. No, I collapse on knees in shame. Gary looks again and really confirms it. He's also in absolute shock. He's looking at it multiple times. His was of processing it, pacing the apartment. No. Oh my god, we're both in panic mode now. What do we do now? Who do we call to clean up the mess? How am I going to break this news to my brother and his wife? They don't have kids, and have no intention of doing so. So their pets are their kids. They'll be devastated, and I feel like I've seriously fucked up my relationship with Glenn and his wife forever. They'll never forgive me. It's all my fault. So Gary is calling the SPCA and whoever else, asking what to do and if someone would be able to clean it up at SAP. I'm now worried about any kids walking by that might see it and get traumatized. They can't send anyone out to clean it until tomorrow. I think about 20 minutes passed when Gary says he thinks someone down there is already cleaning it. He makes his way down there to talk to this person. As he's gone, Mom shows up. We called her and filled her in. I break down even further. This is my fault. A few minutes go by and I get a call from Gary. He says there is nobody down there, and furthermore, there isn't any evidence of a cat falling to its death. The spot we saw his body was bone dry. If someone had washed it up that quickly, there would still at least be a wet spot from the water, or at least from the blood, because there was a lot of it. He tells me to keep looking around the apartment for him. I feel like it's false hope. We know what we saw, so we continue the search. Gary is calling around to see if anyone brought him to an animal hospital or something. We're still baffled by the dry ground. Doesn't make any sense. There was blood everywhere. I specifically remember seeing its forearm detached from its body. The unique purple of its skin contrasted with the bright red blood it was surrounded by. There's no way that could have been cleaned up so fast, with no trace of anything. Then the cat walks out of the bedroom, looks at me as if to say, "Hey man, what's going on out here?" It scares the shit out of me. I jumped back and everything, yelled out, "What the fuck?" Mort. Mom comes running out of the bathroom. I call Gary back inside. We both flip right out, hugging each other and laughing our asses off. He's alive. Both Gary and I saw the carnage on the ground. It's imprinted in my memory now. Gary's too. It was absolutely traumatic to see. I have no idea how to explain it. The Sphinx was emitting some sort of ancient Egyptian cat magic or some shit. But holy fuck, am I ever grateful for the outcome though. I can't properly describe the roller coaster of emotions. The absolute lows of guilt and shame and fear of losing my brother over this, to the elation and relief of seeing the cat walk through the room. The best possible way for the story to end. Has anybody else heard of something like this happening? Is there a name for this phenomenon? Hey girl who wasn't. When I was 16, I took and sat prep class to improve my score and get into a good college. The class was pretty boring, But I met the most interesting girl in the class. She was thin, fairly short, with light brown hair and green eyes. She always wore a green headband, which I thought was cute. Her name was Connie. We hit it off immediately and spent most of the class whispering to each side by side at our desks. I spent about 3 weeks sitting next to her talking during the class. When the class was over, we exchanged IM handles so we could keep in touch. This was in the early 2000s. About a year passed, and we continued talking online. We got to know each other pretty well, but we lived on completely different sides of the city, and it was quite a drive to visit each other, so being the young teens we were, we never actually got together. Eventually, I worked up the courage to ask her out for dinner. I set our date at a restaurant located between the both of us so we wouldn't have to drive too far. The time for our date rolled around, and I headed to the restaurant to meet her. I walked in and saw her sitting in a booth with 2 older individuals at the far side of the establishment. She looked exactly like she did in the class, thin, light brown hair, green eyes, and she was wearing her signature green headband. I approached her and said hello. I gave her a hug and sat down next to her in the booth. I assumed these 2 older individuals across from us were her parents. Odd, I thought, but maybe they were there to chaperone. I could tell immediately something was wrong. The 2 older individuals looked very confused, surprised, almost bewildered. The look on Connie's face was also one of perplexity. Eventually she said, "Who are you?" I was shocked. I said, "Ooh, I'm Jason. Remember, we set up a date for tonight. I assume these are your parents. It is very nice to meet you." And I reached out my hand to shake her parents' hands. They didn't return my handshake. Instead, they simply looked at their daughter and said, "Oh, did you forget to tell us this, Sarah?" "Sarah," I said. "You told me your name was Connie." She looked absolutely puzzled and said, "Sorry, you must have me confused with someone else." "Oh, my mistake," I replied, then scratched my head and headed out of the restaurant to my car. I was embarrassed. Maybe she just didn't want to go out with me, I thought. She could have at least just said no instead of leading me on this charade. Defeated and humiliated, I decided to just head home. When I opened the door to my car, I heard a voice behind me say, "Hey, Jason." I turned around. It was a tall, light blonde-haired woman with a large round face and blue eyes. "Oh, do I know you?" I said. "It's me, Connie. We had a date planned, remember?" "Where are you going?" she said. We went inside and had dinner. She was definitely Connie. She remembered all our previous conversations over the past year, but she looked nothing like the girl I met in class. When I asked her why she stopped wearing her green headband, she had no recollection of ever wearing or even owning this type of headband. I can't explain it. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I'll give the TLDR in advance, since this might at first seem mundane. Basically, 2 days of my life seemed to have been lived out of sequence, with an otherwise ordinary day suddenly becoming very strange the following day. When it became clear that second day should have been the first, I was in college and working at a bookstore during my time off. And although this happened more than 20 years ago, it's bothered me ever since. I recently cracked open my journal from that time, which refreshed me on some of the details. One day, I was working a closing shift, got to work in the afternoon, punched in, and was still in the back room when the owner came up to me and said, "I don't know how I forgot to mention this one, but if you haven't read any of the Nero Wolfe books by Rex Stout, you should. I think you'd really enjoy those." This didn't strike me as especially unusual, as we talked about books and traded recommendations all the time. I did, however, think it odd that this came seemingly out of nowhere, as though I had somehow missed the first part of the conversation. Not long after that, I was at the front desk, and a man came up, asking for a book that he'd called to have held for him. We had shelves below the counter where we kept books that customers either special ordered or asked to have set aside, arranged by the customer's last name. The man's last name was Travis, and I found the book, a used copy of Stanley Carno's History of the Vietnam War. The only reason this made any impression at all is that I'd seen this book throughout my childhood, as we had the same edition at home. Otherwise, this was purely routine. Since I was closing, I didn't get home until around midnight. This was during the summer, between semesters, so I was staying at my parents' place. I looked in the refrigerator for a snack and saw that there was some leftover Indian food. This wasn't out of the ordinary, as my mom worked with an Indian woman who knew I loved Indian food and would frequently give her homemade dishes to bring home to me. What was strange was that it seemed to be half-eaten, and neither of my parents could stomach spicy food, so they never touched it. The next day, I was at work, sorting through some used books in the back room that the owner had just purchased. He was there with me. They were mostly paperback mysteries, And I mentioned that I liked a lot of the old Moore stuff but should read more of the other classics, like Christie and Simon. We then began talking about mysteries, and he made some recommendations. I suddenly had a very eerie feeling, as this seemed like it should have been the missing first half of the conversation that we'd had the previous day. I asked him if he'd recommended Rex Stout to me the day before, and he said no. But now that I mentioned it, I should definitely check him out. Now I felt confused but tried to brush it off. An hour or so later, I was at the front desk and answered the phone. It was a customer asking if we had a book in stock, Stanley Carno's History of the Vietnam War. Now I had a strange sense of deja vu, as I walked over to the history section and found a used copy of the book sitting on the shelf. I went back to the phone and told him that we had it. He asked if I could put it aside and that he'd try to come in for it that evening or the following afternoon at the latest. He gave his last name as Travis, and I asked him if he'd come in yesterday. He said no, he was a somewhat regular customer, but hadn't been there in a month or so. I got home early in the evening, and my parents were out. My mom had, however, left a note on the table for me. Her friend had sent her home with some Indian food for me, which was in the fridge if I wanted to have that for dinner. What I found was the half-eaten dish I discovered and ate the night before, but this time it was fully intact. Has anyone experienced anything like this? Edit. Since several people have asked, I'll note that nothing at all unusual happened the following day. Normal programming resumed, so to speak. So it was as if the flow went Saturday, then Friday, then Sunday. A town that doesn't exist. I live in very rural southern Appalachia, and yesterday, I was going over to the next county to look at lawnmower. It's an area I'm very familiar with, although I haven't been to the area in over a year. While on the way, I came upon a town that has never been there before. Now, there is a small community there, and it was by the same name, but this was a full-fledged small town. Had a couple red lights, a main street with probably 15 minutes 20 storefronts. Everything. I was so taken aback I stopped in the middle of the road. After a few moments, a car behind me honked the horn, so I pulled into a parallel spot and got out. Now the small towns in my area are all the same. Tiny, dingy, rundown, had a heyday in the 50s and 60s, but all have fallen into disrepair. Not this one. Everything was pristine and new looking. Swept sidewalks, shiny windows, and clean brick. The people I saw were dressed in modern clothes and had the same appearance that most people in the area have. Healthy, but weather-beaten and aged beyond their years. The vehicles I saw were fairly modern, new to 20 years old. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked into the little restaurant, Cream of the Crop Cafe, and it looked like every other little restaurant in the area. Booths and tables, a bar top with a register and the kitchen behind it. Some cheesy James Dean and Marilyn Monroe pictures on the walls. I walked up to the girl at the counter and asked her where I was. She seemed puzzled, because I could tell she knew I was local by my attire and my accent. But she said Minneapolis. I said, so this is Minneapolis. When did they build all this? Again, she looked puzzled and said, I don't know. The 1800s sometime. I couldn't handle anymore, so I just left, got in my truck and went on to look at the lawnmower. On my way back through, about an hour later, there was Minneapolis, like it should be. A couple houses and an old general store. No town, no red lights, no cafe, no sidewalks. Freaked me out, something awful. I've never experienced such as this, as I'm pretty mundane and boring. It wasn't a hallucination, I don't think. Everything else was the same. Wasn't a dream. So I don't know. A woman jumped in front of truck, except she didn't. The weirdest thing happened to my friend and I in October last year. We discuss it all the time and we still have no explanation for what we saw. It was about 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and my friend and I were walking to a nearby pub to meet the rest of our friends. We stopped at the lights at an intersection with heavy traffic. As we were talking and waiting for the lights to change, a lady approached us from behind and began waiting as well. There was nothing remarkable about her. The only thing of note, really, is that she had a limp. She was about middle-aged, wearing a red blouse, beige skirt, and bright orange scarf, was holding a bouquet of red flowers, and seemed to be coming home from work. She stopped and stood at the lights a couple meters away from us. She stood there for about 5 seconds, just as a large semi-truck was approaching the intersection at about 45 miles an hour. When it was about to reach us, The lady placed her handbag and flowers on the floor and just stepped in front of it without any warning. We saw the truck hit her. We heard the sound of the hood colliding with her body, and then what sounded like crunching and dragging. I swear I saw her actually beneath the wheels, with all her black hair everywhere as she was being tumbled along under it. The truck just sped by, seemingly without noticing that it had hit someone. My friend had his hands in his hair and was repeating, oh my God, over and over again. While I felt like I was going to vomit, my friend turned and said something like the truck must be dragging her beneath it. It's not even stopping. I thought I was going to black out at this point. My friend pulled out his phone to call the police and an ambulance, when suddenly he stopped mid-sentence, his mouth wide open in complete shock. I turned to see what he was looking at, and it was the same woman, identical, right down to the limp, the bright scarf and the red flowers. No fucking way, I thought. I looked around for the handbag and flowers the woman put down, but they were nowhere to be found. My friend and I were in absolute shock. I walked up to the lady and asked if she was okay, and she just looked at me funny and said that everything was fine. Then the lights changed and we all crossed the street and parted ways. My friend called the local police station just in case, and said that we weren't sure whether we saw a pedestrian get hit by a truck. The police said that they would look into it, and that was that. We didn't hear from them again, so I assume there was no accident. We still can't logically explain what we saw. Has anyone else had something like this happen? Cat got groomed. I cannot stop thinking about this. 8 months ago, a feral kitten got dropped off at my house by the mama. Mama never came back. The kitten was adorable but very scared. It made a home under my shed and I have fed him daily since. Took 7 months for him to trust me enough to let me touch him. He's gorgeous, long-haired. When he started allowing me to pet him, I noticed his hair was very matted down his legs and under his belly. I called around and no groomer would see him without shots and sedation, which required a vet visit. In total was going to cost me $400. We don't have any local feral cat programs. They're all over an hour away and none of them would help. I tried to cut the mats myself with scissors but was unsuccessful. It was like trying to cut through a carpet with sharp claws and an attitude, so I made him an apt. The day of his apt, I tried unsuccessfully to catch him and had to cancel it at the last minute. I was trying to figure out some other options, but I had a trip home planned for the next day to visit family and decided he would have to wait. I went home for 3 days and the whole time was feeling off, like I wasn't supposed to be there. It was a very weird feeling, not in a bad way feeling, but just this trip wasn't supposed to happen, neutral sort of feeling. When I got back from my trip, I had an incident with a lamp that I posted here about. A few days later, I was sitting outside when Kitten came out for dinner. Immediately I noticed he had been groomed, and not just hacked with scissors, but professionally groomed, and all of his matting is gone, his head and neck cleaned up. I could chalk this up to a random Good Samaritan. If only I had neighbors. I'm in the middle of nowhere. This cat is at my house 24/7. He is here always. There's tons of strays in our county and they are genuinely viewed as a nuisance. There's just no way that he befriended someone else who would be crazy enough to spend $400 on an insane feral cat only to release him back to the wild. And what are the chances they do this within days of me having an appointment to get it done? I've kept a close eye on him since and have still yet to see him wander. This coupled with the mysterious lamp to recap. I had an inoperable lamp unplugged and sitting on my nightstand with a blown bulb for nearly a year. It took special bulbs and was just a pita to replace. I finally purchased a bulb for it the day before I left for my trip, but I was too busy packing to swap them out. When I got home from the trip, the lamp was mysteriously plugged in and lit up. Nobody with access to my home. I have been unable to find that package of new bulbs anywhere since. I know for a fact the lamp has not been plugged in for months. I truly believe something happened on that trip to jump me into a new timeline. Perhaps it was one where I was able to catch the feral cat for his apt to be groomed, and one where I also repaired my lamp. Time slip occurring in our home. I assumed this was paranormal phenomenon at first, particularly a mimic demon. But a comment brought to my attention an alternative explanation, and I'm curious as to what people think. So in the past 2-ish days there has been some strange things going on in our house, things that just don't add up. First thing that happened was when I was getting out of the shower. My boyfriend came in as I was drying off and handed me a pair of my panties. I thanked him but told him I already had a pair with me in the bathroom. He said jokingly something along the lines of, "You yelled at me to bring you these." You better take them. I assumed he was just being goofy, so I took the panties and told him to get out of the bathroom. The next bit came within the next few hours. My roommate was getting ready for a date and called me from her bedroom to zip her dress up for her. I went into her room to find that there was nobody there, notably that, but she walked out of the bathroom shortly after wearing jeans and a tank top. Nothing that she would have needed my help zipping. I told her about what I heard and we checked her room out. Her TV and computer were turned off. We were just confused. Around 11 p.m. my boyfriend and I went for ice cream and to watch a performer play and then returned home and fell asleep. My roommate made a comment when we woke up that she could hear us having sex and something along the lines of "You must have been getting good the way you were shrieking." I asked her earlier today around what time that was and she mentioned it was around midnight, which is when we would have been out of the house. Not only that, but we didn't have sex at all on the night in question. The last thing that happened was when we were doing our evening meditation. Through the closed bedroom door we could hear two people talking. We couldn't make out what was being said, but we could hear the actual talking clearly enough. Naturally, I jumped to the conclusion that somebody was in the house, but then someone addressed us directly through the door and said "night y'all" while gigging and walking off. It sounded just like my roommate, and it's worth mentioning that when me and my boyfriend, are in bed together, that's something she says and does through the door to mess with us. Does this sound like a glitch? Could this potentially be a time slip? Like, do you think it's possible that somehow past future incidents just found their way here or got caught in transition? I know this sounds far-fetched, but I honestly don't know. Also, we are having someone check for carbon monoxide tomorrow, and someone checking for mold later this week. My wife glitched. Hello, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I have had 2 or 3 weird things happen in my life, and I thought it's finally time for me share with you all. So this happened about 6 years ago. My wife was at work and wouldn't be home until around 11 at night. It was around 8 at night and I was finishing giving my 2 children a bath. I got my 3Y out first and brought her to my room to get her dressed. We were sort of chatting while I helped her put on her PJs when I heard something and we both stopped and listened at the same time. It sounded like their mother, my wife, talking loudly to someone downstairs. I told her to stay in my room and I walked out into the hall and stood for a second. I could hear her clearly. It sounded like she was talking on the phone with someone. I walked to the stairs and noticed that it is completely dark downstairs, which is odd because my wife wouldn't be standing in the dark talking loudly. So as I start down the stairs, the talking stops. I get to the bottom and listen for a second, but it is dead quiet. I check around, but every light is still off and all doors locked. Nothing was out of place. So I go back upstairs into the bathroom and ask my son, who is still in the tub, if he had heard someone talking just now. He said yes. I asked him who it sounded like and he says "mommy." I get him out and into my room. I call my wife but she doesn't answer. So I tell the kids they are sleeping in my bed with me tonight. Later around 11 my wife gets home, wakes me up asking why the kids are in our bed. I ask her if she had come home earlier and she says no, she was at work all night. I tell her what happened. We moved the kids to their beds and that was that. We lived in that house for 10 years and that was the one and only time something strange happened. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. A child answered my thought. I don't really know if this belongs here, but it's such a weird but insignificant event that I need to share it. I was at a family event today, Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and unfortunately, my family eat that kind of thing up. There were a few relatives I knew but hadn't spent a lot of time with, while sat away from the main celebrations with my partner and one of the kids. She was 9 and took a shine to us. I thought I could smell smoke, didn't vocalize it, didn't even look up from my phone, just thought it. The girl looked at me and said, "You're right. They're having a fire next door. You can see the smoke." She then proceeded to point above the trees, where there was smoke. My partner asked what she was on about and she didn't reply. I later asked my partner if I'd spoke aloud about fires and she said no. I also shouted her name for like 10 minutes after and got no response. So less psychic and more glitch. Was also sober and don't believe in the paranormal. A customer called me from the future today. I am a sales manager at a very well-known auto parts store. Our store is kind of on the smaller side, so we typically only have 2 people working at a time. We sometimes order parts directly from our vendors for customers if they're for rare or classic cars and thus something we don't need to stock. When the parts come in, We call the customer to let them know they're ready for pickup. Today we received a call from one of our regulars. I answer and he says, "Hey, I see I just missed 2 calls back to back from you guys. Are my parts in?" I let him know we haven't received our truck yet and neither me or my coworker have made a call all day. I even checked the recent calls and verified no outgoing calls have been made since yesterday evening. He informs me he's on his cell phone and looking at the 2 missed calls in his log as we speak. We talk about how weird that is and hang up. Within 5 minutes, his parts show up. I go to call him back, and after the first ring accidentally end the call, I immediately hit redial, and as soon as the phone begins ringing, it dawns on me that I've just called him twice back to back. He didn't answer and I'm still wondering what happened. Went to bed sick. Woke up feeling fine, but my daughter's favorite toy changed colors. I think I died. Hey guys, weird happening here. About 2 weeks ago I was feeling off. Like I was going to have a heart attack or going to pass out or throw up. I don't have insurance at the moment, so I decided I would sleep it off. My daughter's favorite toy was on the couch when I came out to the living room. It is a blue dinosaur plushie she takes everywhere with her. Well, I scooted it over on the couch and started watching TV hoping I would pass out, and I grabbed her toy and had it in my hands to distract me. I eventually fell asleep and woke up the next day. My GF and kid were gone and I got up to get some water. I looked down on the floor and thought, "Oh shit, she forgot her toy, she's gonna have a fit." Then it hit me. Instead of the dark blue toy I see all the time, it was bright green. I know I'm not crazy, she's had it for a year now, and when I had asked what should we name it, I even said we should name it Blue. She throws a fit about the toy constantly and says, "I want my blue dinosaur. I want my blue dinosaur." So I know for a motherfucking fact this thing was blue. I thought maybe she had a second dinosaur similar, and I'm not crazy. Then my GF calls me asking if her toy was still at home. I asked the blue dinosaur. She replied, "No, the green one she has all the time." I said, "Well, what about the blue one?" To which she responded, "There is no blue one, what are you talking about?" My head started to spin. I started reading online about theories on our consciousness traveling to another dimension when we die, because I admit I was having a bit of death anxiety after that night. I usually have panic attacks or anxiety, but this was way different. Anyways, I started looking into theories about souls and consciousness, and came across that one and how it lays within the parameters of infinite universes and small things in people's lives changing after an accident, near-death experience, etc. I'm not convinced I died, but something weird definitely happened that night, and now I have this bright green dino making me question everything I know. Edit. For clarification, I have not had COVID recently. I don't have any gas in my home. My water heater is gas, but it's outside in a closed area, and I have a C2 detector in my apartment, so I think I'm solid regarding that. I don't take any medications or anything of the sort. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, then hit the like. See you guys next time.